Україно, рідна земля мати. Господь, Отець наш Небесний, благословіть.
Now, the Bradley has lived up to its nickname, Tank Killer. In these next frames, a modern Russian T-90M tank turns into a sieve. The American combat monster once again confirmed its effectiveness. The M242 Bushmaster cannon is capable of penetrating up to 40 millimeters of steel armor. The fatal mistake of this Russian tank is its position relative to the Bradley. Incendiary and armor-piercing rounds damaged the tank's systems. The crew panicked, released smoke screens, and tried to retreat. But the machine already had its critical damage. This is what a Russian tank looks like after an encounter with Brad. Another example. The Russians tried to break through in the Stepov area. The Ukrainians responded with the help of Bradley. The American armored personnel carrier shreds Russian BMP with shells. Part of the armor falls off the Russian armored personnel carrier. Take a look at this again. The attack failed. The Russians were defeated. The high mobility of the Bradley allows for a rapid response to threats and their neutralization. Bradley came to stop the Russian infantry, which is crossing the field to storm Ukrainian positions. Even if the Russians reach another planting, it changes nothing. The cannon cuts down trees like thin branches. They offer no cover. This is an incident near Avdiivka. Ukrainian assault troops called for reinforcements. The Bradley IFV easily suppresses the Russian advance. And even if the Russians manage to occupy a building, there's no sense in hiding in it. Brad's cannon will riddle the building's walls. If an enemy tank or armored personnel carrier is at a great distance from Bradley, the Ukrainians use anti-tank missiles, with which the armored personnel carrier is armed. Take a look at this real example from Ukraine. Bradley is often used in offensive operations, but due to their scarcity in the Ukrainian army, we don't see many videos of their use. Where the use of Workhorse is impossible, and this armored personnel carrier is far from a panacea, Ukrainians use many other systems and weapons. The Russians begin the attack. The tank goes first, followed by the BMP. The armored personnel carrier continuously fires at them. At some point, the armored personnel carrier turns into a cloud of fire and shrapnel. What weapon do you think is capable of this? At first, I thought it was a javelin or anti-tank mines, but no, it was a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. Wow, what a powerful explosion! And here's what happened to the Russian tank that was leading. First, the Ukrainians immobilized it, then directed a kamikaze drone at it and burned it. It's no secret that Ukrainians have managed to secure positions on the left bank of Kherson. It was these positions that Russian tanks aimed to storm. The Ukrainians don't have heavy machinery here, but they do have kamikaze drones. A drone strikes the tank's turret, and not even an armored shield can handle that. The shaped charge reaches the ammunition, causing a massive detonation. Another thwarted attack of Russian tanks. The kamikaze drone pursues the target and hits the tank in the most vulnerable part of the turret. This part of the Russian tank stores some of the ammunition. That's why they often explode after being hit by drones. The turret was thrown several meters from the tank. Excellent work. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone enters the Russian tank with precision. After a few seconds of agonizing wait, an explosion occurs. It seems the Ukrainians have started using self-destructing systems for drones in such cases. Smoke, fire, and a spectacular explosion. This video is yet another good example. The Russians should have long considered the storage of ammunition in the tank turret. Look at the force with which the turret is thrown up. At that moment, incredible pressure is created inside the tank. After the failed assault, the Russians abandoned their tank. Ukrainians use FPV drones to destroy it. One of the hits proves fatal for the Russian tank. The skill, resilience, and courage with which Ukrainians defend their land are worthy of respect. Let's support them by liking this video. And now, let's continue. Kamikaze drones can reach Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and infantry in the most inaccessible places or several kilometers from the front line. In this video, the Russians are preparing fortification structures, and engineering equipment is at work. The drone dives into an excavator, and an explosion occurs. The fuel ignites brilliantly. The job is done perfectly. In this building, the enemy might be hiding. Sending a battle bus to solve this task is foolish and dangerous. Ukrainians launch a drone that flies into the building and explodes. The building collapses. Another house where the Russians set up a stronghold. It's impossible to approach them closely, and the artillery is occupied with other tasks. The kamikaze drone effectively accomplishes the task. Or this operation to destroy a BM-21 Grad in the rear. Special forces identify the target, launched a drone, and directed it to the Russian rocket artillery. The Russians tried to change their location, but they couldn't escape pursuit. The existence of this BM-21 Grad is terminated. Russian reconnaissance and sabotage groups set out to storm. Dozens of Russian soldiers. The Ukrainian Armed Forces strike drones are already over the battlefield and begin bombing. Continue watching via the link in the description. But let's return to armored personnel carriers and Russian tanks. More footage of the magical transformation of a Russian tank into a pile of scrap metal. The Avdiivka region. A Russian T-90M tank assaults Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians deploy artillery to hinder this. As things heat up, the tank starts to retreat. At that moment, it's caught by a kamikaze drone. The modern Russian tank is destroyed. Another unsuccessful assault. A T-72 tank and a BMP with infantry. One hit in the engine compartment, and the tank turns into a can of sardines with a gun. The Russians got a bit dreamy and left the tank unattended. Quick and attentive, Ukrainians launched several drones and destroyed this outdated meat pot. A Russian tank found itself in the wrong place at the wrong time. A dramatic and effective hit by a kamikaze drone puts the Russian tank out of action. The Gvozdika howitzer was firing on Ukrainian soldiers. The response was quick and harsh. 3 drones left the howitzer no chance of survival. Drones have high speed and good maneuverability. Light vehicles often lose in this competition. On this truck, the Russians often carried provisions and ammunition to their positions. They became a little too careless. The drone destroyed the truck. Don't discount strike drones. They continue to serve. In this video, the drone hits 2 targets at once, a damaged tank and a recovery vehicle. But that's not all. American HIMARS are always effective and deadly. So far, the Russians have found no defense against them. A heavy flamethrower system, Sointsepek, worth $15 million, was lurking in this forest. Ukrainian intelligence spotted the target and passed its coordinates to the HIMARS. As always, the result was spectacular. In these frames, you can see the flamethrower system Sointsepek ablaze. In a moment, you'll witness a very powerful explosion. The fire heated the ammunition, leading to the scenario I just described. A BM-27 Uragan, a formidable and destructive weapon. 2 of these MLRS ended up in one place. I'm sure after this hit, both machines are out of commission. The second missile surely destroys the remains of the Russian junk. A BM-21 Grad, the younger brother of the MLRS from the previous video. It's smaller caliber, but has more rockets, and this rocket artillery is no less dangerous. A HIMARS missile lands perfectly on its target. You can estimate the force of the explosion of the MLRS from this spot. Another video featuring HIMARS. First, Ukrainians target a truck and a howitzer. The next target for the HIMARS is the heavy mortar Tulip. A direct hit leads to the detonation of the mortar's ammunition. In these next clips, we see two trucks loaded with ammunition. The second missile accurately hits both targets, followed by a brief fire and then an explosion of some of the ammunition. The Russian field headquarters for coordinating troop actions. Notice how the Russians dispersed their vehicles to reduce the likelihood of all being hit by a single Ukrainian strike. The R-18 radar was conducting airspace reconnaissance. Two HIMARS missiles puts an end to that activity. An OSA-SAM, an important element in the fight against missiles and drones, but not against HIMARS missiles. The target is hit. The Zaporizhia region. Special Operations Forces intelligence identified two self-propelled mortars, Nona S. Coordinates have already been relayed to the HIMARS unit. A direct hit destroys the Russian weaponry. Ukrainians discovered a Russian howitzer. Boom! Clouds of smoke rise from where the artillery just was. The target is destroyed. The second target, a BM-21 Grad that the Russians tried to hide in the forest. The first hit